Again tonight. This is crucial for everyone who is a patriot. You're Nigerian and you have the Spirit of Christ in you. You want our children's children to be able to have a nation where there's freedom, where there's liberty. It's absolutely important that this time around you listen to what we have for you. How to terrorize a terrorist. This is part 6. Now people ask us, is it possible to terrorize a terrorist? Well, check your Bible in Matthew chapter 8, in verse 29. The Bible says, and the demons cried out, behold, they said, what have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come to torment us before the time? Here we have two demon spirits who are crying out to Jesus that they are being tormented. So it is possible to torment the tormentor and to terrorize the terrorist. Listen, there's a reason why a terrorist is a terrorist. Not a doctor, not an engineer or a plumber. A terrorist is a terrorist because he uses the instrument of terror. That's the tool of his trade. And the Bible has instructed every believer in Philippians chapter 1 verse 28 that you should be in nothing, in no way terrified by your adversaries, which to them is an evidence of perdition, but to you of salvation and that of God. So the Bible already instructs you and tells you that there must be no terrified or terrorized persons in the fold. And that's why in every nation, the church is always the first in the line of attack for terrorists, and actually should be the first in the line of defense of that nation. Now, still talking about terrorism, the Bible says in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14, you know, a terrorist is a child of Satan because it's their father who understands the tool of terror. Hebrews 2 says, in 14 says, for as much as the children were partakers of flesh and blood, he himself also likewise took part of the same. For what reason? So that through death he could destroy the power of him who held the power of death, that is the devil, and set free all those who throughout their lives were in bondage, in captivity, enslaved by their fear of death. Now listen carefully. Satan has used the fear of death to torment man for millennia. And I can tell you something, this is why Jesus Christ came to destroy not only the one who has the power of death, but to put away the fear of death. Now take note, every terrorist and their father, Satan, know that the fear of death is a more effective weapon than death itself. So here we see basically that there are certain instructions that we have as believers when we want to terrorize the terrorist. We know we have to be able to torment the tormentor. You must be able to waylay the waylayer. This is what the word of God expects for every church in every nation. However, there's something going on in the Nigerian church, and I have the opportunity to advise many people in high places at close quarters. But there's a generation of leaders that I cannot say are exactly paying much attention to kind of spiritual details that we need to know if this nation is going to overcome the challenge that we have in terms of terrorism. Number one, Bible in Proverbs chapter 14 verse 12 says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death and destruction, which means there are certain strategies that the church may be, absorbing. There are strategies that the people of God may embrace that are not necessarily right. They may look right on the surface, but let me tell you the truth. We walked in the terror zones of Nigeria, and I want to tell you one confession tonight. The greater number of people who have been killed unnecessarily have been as a result of the disobedience of the leadership of the faith community through the years. Now, number one, let me tell you this. Spiritually speaking, the church is not allowed to be praying and bringing in a spirit of death. Bible says life and death is in the power of the tongue. And it is the Nigerian church that has been enabling the spirit of death, giving permission to the spirit of death to go on rampage in Nigeria. So every time you hear the shouts of die, 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 die in prayer, you may think you know what you are doing, but if you go back to the Garden of Eden, it was the same challenge. Death was dormant until man unleashed it. Right now, the spirit of death is on rampage because the church has officially, and I will plead with us that somebody needs to talk to the church. Proverbs chapter 24, verse 17 says, do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and don't let your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and it displease him, and turn away his wrath from your enemy. Now, the Bible here says God doesn't even want a believer to rejoice when his enemy falls or stumbles. That your heart is not even meant to be glad at all. God does not want to see the death of a sinner. What he's looking forward to is for the sinner to come to repentance. If you go throughout scriptures, you will find that this is true. And that's why it is not allowed for any person connected to God genuinely to begin to use his mouth to call for the spirit of death. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So spiritually speaking, we need to shut a window that is open. Some friends of mine said there's a primary school next to him. In the morning, he hears hundreds of children who at a very tender age have been taught to pray, die, 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 die. These are just invocations for the spirit of death to go on rampage in the territory called Nigeria, where we're supposed to be holding authority. So let's put that aside quickly. Somebody needs to stop the mouths of those who are invoking the spirit of death unknowingly, unwittingly, or maybe there are some agents that have infiltrated the church who know what they're doing, but people are dying, and the spirit of death has to be subdued. Now, what's the second thing that I want us to look at? And this one now is extremely important. Not many people realize that for many years, when we tried to get Nigeria to recognize that we had a problem, a global terrorist problem, the country was in denial for decades. Started working about 1998, 1999, toured northern Nigeria from place to place. There are many people in leadership positions all over this country that can testify to this, that we went in stealth mode, warning everybody that we can stop this thing before it rises. But before you can propose a cure, a doctor must be able to diagnose accurately. There is a way that seems right to a man, but the ends thereof are the ends of death and destruction. There is a misdiagnosis going on. What Nigeria is facing today is a local phase of a global phenomenon. And when you unmask it, it is not a religious problem per se. It is actually a satanic problem disguised or robed in religious garb. Now, if you don't know what this means, I'm going to tell you right now. What we are facing all over the world today, including Nigeria, is a shapeshifter. It's a hydra. We'll talk about that much later on. But the point is this. It can be Boko Haram today, and when it sees that things are not going well that way, it can change its form into Fulani cattle headsmen tomorrow. And if you are able to understand and hold it again there, it can easily change to an Almajiri revolution day after tomorrow if you don't really understand how it is. It infiltrates politics, it infiltrates government, it infiltrates education, it infiltrates entertainment, it infiltrates every pillar of society. This is what Nigeria is up against, and this is the greatest error that the Nigerian church is still committing today, because we refuse to understand this. And I want you to challenge all the people that you know who, I want to say some things right now. The things that I point out to you right now, if you don't know them, please go and study them. And once you study them, please have enough grace for us to have a correction before more people die again and there'll be more blood on the head of the leadership of Nigerian church. Now, what we're facing today is a special concoction that started out with the work of three men. Go and do your studies. Born 1906, one of them was born in 1906, one was born in 1903. Two of them actually were born in 1906. The men are Hassan al-Banna. Go and research this. One was called Abu Allah Maududi. If you have read, he wrote about 100 and something books. His name was Maududi. And the third one, Saeed Qutb, who was born in 1906, who joined what they call the Muslim Brotherhood, I think in 1950. Now, the first one, called Hassan al-Banna, was the one who actually founded the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928. Now, between these men that you see, they wrote the most important theological books that form the foundation of what we are facing today. You see, I don't want to go into too many details, but I can tell you something, that go and investigate the names of people like Dr. Salah Shokri. investigate and research on Shokri, Mustafa, and Abdul Salam Faraj. These were all Islamic clerics who chose to go the way of radicalism, and they built upon what the first set had put together. In the next generation that we're going to perfect what has become the global plot that we are all facing and trembling at today, you had men like Abud Zuma. The second one was Karam Zodi, then Asim Abdul Magedi. Now, go and study these ones. They are the ones who wrote the constitutions of Al-Jihadi. Go and find out what Al-Jihadi is. It's like the textbook for all terrorists. Now, there are many things I don't want us to discuss unnecessarily here, but there's a fact is that the Nigerian church, because it refuses to understand thoroughly the difference between a satanic problem with a religious cover and an outright religious problem, is leading and misleading many people, and the bloodshed is increasing. Now, why am I saying these things to you? The fourth set of clerics who now perfected what we are looking at. I told you about the first set of the who attended. I mean, those ones who attended like Al-Azhar University. 2 out of the first original 3 I told you by age 10 had memorized the Quran. They were Hafiz, but these men were the ones who wrote that violent twist into the narrative that has developed into what you are seeing today. So it took about 3-4 generations of these persons, starting with the ones who were born in 1903, 1906. But the final set of people who made it what it is today were 2 young men who are referred to as aristocrats because they came from extremely wealthy backgrounds. And I'm talking about nobody less than Osama bin Laden, born July 1957, and his very close friend, Ayman al-Zawahiri. Zawahiri was born in 1951. Now, between these 2 gentlemen, they were the ones who took a look at the terrorist script that had been developed starting from that first set. And they sat down and perfected that script. Some of the work they did was done in Sudan, next door to us here. In 1991, Osama bin Laden moved to Sudan. And if you go and find out, he met with various Nigerians. I don't know why we continue to pretend as if we don't know what is going on. There are a number of things he did in the Sudan that have affected Nigeria, are still affecting Nigeria today, even into the business community. I don't want to say more than that. But the truth is this. Osama bin Laden and Zawahiri worked together to perfect, to make a global franchise, a deadly machinery, a global machinery out of what used to be a primitive terrorist engine. In fact, 2 of them are known for something. It was bin Laden who taught them how to strike far away from home. That if you're going to be a real jihadist, you don't have to wait and be striking in your local territory. You make your plans, you work with a global structure which has compartments, and then you strike far away from home. Now, on the other hand, it was his friend, Zawahiri. I mean, there's a picture of the 2 of them sitting out together there, and Osama bin Laden. Look, they may be dead, but let me tell you the truth. Their legacy is what we are facing in Nigeria. And as long as we continue to ignore it, the church is going to keep misadvising, and we're going to lead many people to an early death and end up escalating. Because these 2 men decided to design something in such a clever satanic way. It's a satanic machinery disguised as a religion for a purpose. Now, the moment you misdiagnose it as a religious problem and you begin to stir up Christians versus Muslims, without going into the details of what these men were able to package as a machinery, what you are doing is that you are trying to use liquid petrol to put out a fire. So the more we respond with religious rhetoric, the more CAN continues to make jojo, the more CAN begins to make noise, the more the PFN begins to rally people quietly and say, look, it's Muslims versus Christians, the more you are playing into the hand of a satanic plot that knows that you don't know the difference between a religious problem and a satanic problem disguised in religious garb. Now, the more you separate the Christian and the Muslim and create enmities, the more you allow this global terrorist machinery in your locality, the more you will allow it to be able to find a ground, a breeding ground, to do what? To radicalize Muslims who have already been separated from their friends that are Christians. Now, in any community where the Christians and the Muslims continue to be friends and refuse to stop being friends, global terrorism has a problem. That's why the southwest of Nigeria has been a huge headache. And that's why even in the last strike that you saw in Plateau State, there was a Muslim cleric who hid a lot of Christians in his mosque. So the truth is this problem has never been a Christian versus Muslim fight. It is a satanic fight that stirs up divisions and strife between Christians and Muslims towards its purpose. And guess what? Many years ago, I've had the opportunity to advise in an advisory capacity at least three generations of CAN presidents, the Christian Association of Nigeria. And I remember that one of the first things I said to one particular generation of leadership when they began a strategy of church reaction, I said, no, there's a difference between response and reaction. And that, listen, do not let us go on a Christian versus Muslim strategy, because we are going to play into the script prepared by Osama bin Laden and Zawahiri, perfected in Sudan next door to us here. And they said to me, but Pastor Ladi, why would you give us such a counsel? I said, sir, you just wait a while and you will notice that this same machinery will begin to slaughter any Muslim's cleric that does not agree with them. It didn't take up to a week and a half before they began to kill Muslims. But even then, it is easier to whip up sentiments in the Christian populace to nurse hatred against the Muslim than to admit a truth of the Spirit of God and to just stay focused. Now, if we go and get a book called the 9/11 Commission Report, you don't even have to be in the Spirit to go and begin to read some of the strategies that even the Western world has been able to understand about the global menace that is troubling Nigeria here on a local basis. So if you can get these books are available freely in bookstores all over the world. You can see where Nigeria is mentioned. You can see where quite a number of things are mentioned about how Osama bin Laden directly trained Nigerians. So what are we talking about till now? So what am I trying to get across to us? If we want to beat the war against terror, please let every believer that has any influence know that we are instructed by God not to be terrorized or terrified in any way, because we are the ones who can torment the tormentor. We are the ones who can terrorize the terrorist. And as far as God is concerned, there are only three things that we are meant to do. Number one, refuse to be terrorized. Number two, activate the mind of Christ. Think the way Christ thinks, which is the way God thinks. And then number four, deploy the mind of Christ. It is only by activating the mind of Christ that you'll be able to detect that this is a satanic problem wearing a terrorist cover. And the moment we do that, we will quit stirring up Christians to hate Muslims. As long as we continue to do that, Nigeria will not only burn, it will go down. And it will go down because the salt refused to be salty. It will go down because the light that was meant to be on top of the hill decided to extinguish itself. So I want to plead with you people and I plead with a lot of seriousness, because as I speak right now, I remember people like Andrew Northcott, the husband of Rose Northcott, who was butchered many, many years ago. And that was, I think, in the year 2000 in Kaduna. And his wife, lovely wife Rose, left behind with children, have been able to survive to today, struggling day to day. Not necessarily that the church has been ever taking care of the survivors, despite all the noise that the church makes all over the whole place. Not as if we have cared to give value to the lives of our people. Ask Booker Samson in Jos, whose father was slaughtered. Go and ask the Akijogbe family, who lost a son who came to do his youth call, and they slaughtered him shouting Allah Akbar while they were doing it. Go and ask whether Nigeria has ever, the church in Nigeria, has ever really sat down to give value to the lives of the people who even belong to us. So what am I saying? One day we will account before God. If we don't want Nigeria to go down, let's get serious. There's a lot of blood flowing that doesn't need to flow. We need to understand one thing. It is not a religious problem. And every time you continue to react, making it a religious problem, you are setting up other people's children to die, and it will come to your children sooner or later. Now, if we don't want this to destroy a country, we must stop reacting and start responding. And for us to respond, go to the scriptures. This is why I will forever salute the courage of this young girl called Leah. And I believe that her name should be on the mouth of every Christian leader in Nigeria today who wants to terrorize the terrorist, who wants to torment the tormentor. Leah Sharibu is already terrorizing the terrorist. She had the opportunity to gain a toxic freedom, a freedom where there's no guarantee of religious liberties. On behalf of all Muslims and Christians and every citizen of this country, she rejected a freedom that does not give the guarantees that were promised to us for being citizens of this country. Young girl, Philippians chapter 1 verse 20. According to my earnest expectation and my hope, that in nothing shall I be ashamed, but that with all boldness as always, and even so now, Christ shall be magnified in my body, whether it be by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Leah Sharibu, we pray, will return to us alive, but she has demonstrated that a genuine believer has no fear of death. A genuine believer will choose Jesus Christ, will choose the kingdom of God, will choose religious liberties over a toxic freedom. She's not the only one. We remember some years back, our friend, our good pastor George Oji in Maiduguri, who was beheaded on the orders of the Boko Haram leader called Yusuf. When they captured it, he was preaching to the jihadists, all of them, and they had to take him personally to Yusuf, and they preached to Yusuf that, look, I may be in chains, you have the gun, you have the machete, but I have freedom, you are bound. A lot of people try to deride him till today, but wait till we see Jesus Christ face to face. We will then know who the fool is. Those who deride examples like that, those who hate to magnify the heroes of faith, who have demonstrated that eternal life is weightier than temporary toxic freedom, and those who continue to follow Mammon as God, whose God is their belly. So what am I trying to point out to us is, number one, refuse to be terrified, activate the mind of Christ, and let us begin to deploy the mind of Christ. Plead with every church leader you know as they continue to stir up people into indignation. Beg them, do whatever you have to do to please not make it a Christian versus Muslim fight. No, it's satanic. If we take out Satan, all those that Satan has held through religion will fall and they will surrender. Perhaps I should just give a practical example for some of those who are still questioning the wisdom of what I'm telling you here. More than a decade ago, I won't specify when, we were in a northern state and we were having a meeting when experts sat down and broke down some things, and right in that state, the leadership of the Christians brought out a document they were about to sign. But based on the seminar that we had had to give them good understanding of what was happening in their state, they discovered that if they had signed that document, they would have signed away the liberty and the freedom of children into 7-10 generations. And when they saw this, they brought out another document, which was an official document that was capturing the speech of a particular general overseer. The security forces had been following him. They mentioned his name, mentioned his headquarters, mentioned his church, mentioned the state where he traveled to, mentioned what he said on the pulpit on Sunday, quoted the number of people in the church, and for you to realize that there's an infiltration all over the whole place. May God help us. They mentioned how there was a strategy, of course, to throttle the church, and we're going to come to a place where they looked as if they want to help us and claim that we begin to register all preachers in every state. But by registering the preachers in every state, they were also cleverly creating a board that was weighted to one side, which would mean that if I'm to leave Lagos State today and I want to go to Sokoto to preach the gospel, I would need to first of all get a license from Sokoto State to preach the gospel. Now, it sounded nice on the surface and divided. The Catholics were happy that at least we can use this to muzzle these noisy Pentecostals. The Baptists were happy that, okay, this at least puts some sanity into proceedings, and it divided up the church again as usual, and it would have been signed. So when these people saw that these things got a better understanding of how the wisdom behind these things, they pleaded with us to talk to the general overseer who had made those statements on stage. Now, I remember we had to travel many hours, almost a whole day's journey, to visit one of the tip-top notes of the states of Nigeria. And when we got there, I remember the church leader went on about how he was bravely challenging everybody and this and that and that. And because I had some consultants with me who could break down the result of his speech, we could hardly speak. And those ones signaled me that we should go. And I said, if I let you go, I'm the one who will remain in Nigeria here. Please, you know what? Just be patient. Let me talk to him. I had to beg this leader, let us please try and even talk while you are praising yourself on the great things you have done. When he finally kept quiet for a few minutes, and they began to explain to him, all your utterances will be taken and translated into other languages, including Arabic. Now, you are reacting and telling people that nobody has a monopoly of violence, that we can respond violence to violence and things like that. But unknown to you, when your speech is being translated, nobody will know it's a reaction based on laws. So they will use this as the proof that all Nigerian Christians want to kill all Nigerian Muslims. And when it's translated into foreign languages, it will be taken out as evidence to certain areas of the world where millions of dollars will be raised based on the hatred in your reaction. And they will now use that to bring more money, buy more ammunition, do much more to come and slaughter more Christians and of course more Muslims who refuse to line up with the satanic agenda. Thank God he was a very humble man, because by the time we were able to finally explain the details and explain to him that the terrorists would never kill him because he's too useful to them. They may even go after some other church leaders, but they would never go after him. Why is he useful? Because the more he's reacting in the flesh, the more he's shouting how they should raise armies and fight back and kill them and this and that, the more he's enabling and increasing the funding of terrorism against Nigeria. He was a very humble man, because when he heard all these things, he sat down, asked a few questions, obviously very intelligent and spirit-filled man, and immediately he changed his strategy. But how many people? I would have thought that these are things that spirit-filled men who are the helm of affairs should know. So really and truly, when I say these things to us, it's because people will die. You will pat yourself on the back that you are a strong leader, you are a bold leader, but what you are saying is only being used like liquid petrol to try and quench a fire. You are the one increasing the problem. And so the next thing you're going to ask me, so what should we do? We'll talk about that the next time we get together. By the time next time we get together, the important thing for right now is that the church in Nigeria must abandon Christian versus Muslim. No. Let it be all righteous people who do righteousness on one side versus evil people. Let it be light versus darkness. The Bible says that he that doeth righteousness is righteous. So for now, in Nigerian scope, we know the scripture says that he that is not against us is for us. Anybody who has value for human worth today is my friend in Nigeria and all over the world. That's the way God expects us to think. Because this is a clever problem that hooked from the early 1900s and has just matured now. And it's so easy to be deceived and to play into it. I want to beg you, hit the share button. I want to beg you, talk about this thing. I want to plead with you. Anybody you know in Nigerian church leadership, no matter what anybody is going on and about, for those who want to be argumentative, combative, and debative, please give them my number, give them my name, and prepare to come and prostrate and talk to them. We have seen too much bloodshed. We've seen people who postulate, make noise, lead others, and say so many things with great bombast, who still do not understand fundamentally how to diagnose the problem properly, putting the lives of so many more in jeopardy and at risk. And let me say to you, we don't need the prophecy to know this. If we continue to stir up hatred and strife, only Satan is blessed by it, and Nigeria will go down. And it will not be because they were better than us. It will just simply because we have a leadership that is much more clever than God himself. May God protect your children. May God help everybody. But all I plead with you is this. We've mourned enough families. We've seen enough bloodshed. We beg with you, let us leave a legacy of peace for the generations to come. Whether Christian, whether Muslim, anybody who has a fear of God right now, we need to work together. That's all I will say for now. Thank you very much.